All right, I am going to follow Joey's lead and attempt to do the clicker microphone deal because I'm not very good at standing behind a podium. But first of all, to Dr. Woodward, to Dr. Von Nessen, which way am I going? I'll let them get that figured out. And to the Moore School, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for the opportunity to have a few moments of your time amidst a group of very prestigious speakers. And I also want to thank all of you for giving up an entire day to talk about important topics like this one during what is no doubt a very busy time of the year. So I'm certainly grateful to be here. As promised, I'm Meghan Hickman. I'm the proud executive director of Ingenuity SC. And today my hope is to provide a little bit of a different perspective on what's going on here in the Midlands. I will be honest with you, I am not an economist. I am a project manager by trade. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit of information that's perhaps data-driven, but a different perspective from what you've been seeing today. And let's see here if we can, there we go, excellent. Now we're ready to roll. So a little bit first about Ingenuity SC and the role that we play here in the region. And then what I'd like to transition into is a tool that we've been using now for the past 3 years called the Midlands Regional Competitiveness Report. And that has been a tool that I think has been an incredibly valuable tool for us here in the Midlands. And here's what I know to be true and what I suspect many of you in this room know to be true, and that is that information and data and benchmarking is incredibly important. But, and this is a big but, it goes from being important to being powerful when it can inform decision-making and when it can catalyze action. And at Ingenuity SC, and what I want to share with you today is how we're using economic development tools and metrics and benchmarking to catalyze the action we're seeing around the mid-state. But first, a little bit about who we are at Ingenuity SC. Ingenuity is a nonprofit economic development organization that was formed in 2003. Our mission in this region, our purpose in life, is to make the Midlands of South Carolina the most competitive and prosperous region it can possibly be. Ultimately, we believe that collaboration is the best vehicle to creating a more competitive and prosperous region. And so our special sauce and the niche that we fill in this region is in managing collaborations with the public sector, the private sector, with education, and with community and economic development leaders. And collaboration management really is what we do best at Ingenuity SC. So our sweet spot is in finding opportunities to work with those four entities, public sector, private sector, education, and economic development, and to help create programs and collaborations that will enhance the 5 areas of competitiveness that we measure and track at Ingenuity SC. And those 5 areas of competitiveness include talent, entrepreneurship, innovation, industry cluster development, and livability. So our sweet spot for this region is when we can work with those different sectors, when we can create a collaboration, and when we can enhance one of those 5 areas of competitiveness. And that's what we do at Ingenuity SC. But what I want to spend the time talking about today is our Midlands Regional Competitiveness Report and how this tool is not only informing decision-making around our region, but is catalyzing action to create real change and positive momentum here in the mid-state of South Carolina. First, a little bit about the tool. This tool was developed initially in 2012, and it was done in a response to some companion tools in both the upstate and the low country that had really been generating some positive results. Both the upstate and the low country had been producing competitiveness reports for between 5 and 10 years, respectively. And so in 2012, our team looked around the landscape and we began asking questions why the Midlands didn't have a benchmarking tool that had been so valuable in the other regions of the state. So Ingenuity SC, at our board's recommendation, took the leadership role. We were very fortunate to create a steering team of community leaders from around the region. We were so fortunate to get to partner with the USC Moore School of Business with Doug and Joey and their team, as well as SC Biz, to complete the first round of data and metrics for the first Midlands Regional Competitiveness Report. We didn't end up producing physically the first copy of our report until 2014, but we've now been through 2 cycles of the report, and we're starting to learn some really interesting things about what the data tells us, and more importantly, that information is now beginning to catalyze action around the region that I'm particularly encouraged by. So a little bit about the report itself. First and foremost, the information that we're looking at in the Midlands Regional Competitiveness Report encompasses a 6-county region. So we are comparing the Columbia MSA and the 6 counties that encompass that MSA against peer and aspirant regions around the Southeast. Here's a list of some of those peer and aspirant regions, including Knoxville. We look at both Greenville and Charleston, Lexington, Kentucky, Tallahassee, and others. We included Raleigh as our aspirant community, and you'll see here on the right side of the screen where we've listed sort of the benchmarks and process for determining who those peer communities would be. It was important to us that it felt like they were communities who shared similar assets, be it demographic, geographic, or other. So here are some of the indicators we use to determine our peer and aspirant communities. We structured the report similarly to the way both Charleston and Greenville had structured theirs, using those 5 indicators of competitive communities to tell our story. And what we figured that was critically important to the success of a tool like this is not only presenting the story of the numbers, but telling the story of the region. Because we discovered quickly that the numbers can be sliced and diced to say a whole lot of different things. But ultimately, we wanted to be able to have a tool that could already get to the heart of the good things happening in the region. So while we may not be performing well in one index, where are we already seeing organizations or entities or improvements in the region that are tackling that head on? So our report became a combination of a vehicle that could tell both the data-driven story and the anecdotal stories of the positive improvements around the region. But ultimately, these were the 5 indicators that we focused on, looking at talent development, entrepreneurial and business environment, innovation, industry clusters, and livability. So I want to spend just a few moments kind of working our way through the report and sharing some of the major observations that we've seen coming out of it. First, talent. You'll see here we're sharing the numbers in a couple of different ways. On the right side of the screen, you'll see the individual metrics that make up the overall index. And the overall index is comparing the Columbia MSA ultimately to the national average and then ranking that comparison amongst our peer and aspirant cities. So when we look at this particular index, you'll see some of the metrics that we're measuring, including GDP per worker, STEM degrees, knowledge workers, education attainment, and global talent. So we'll take a closer look at where we're seeing both some positive trends and some areas of improvement. First and foremost, some of the positive trends, and these are specific to Columbia. I do want to share, not only are these trends specific to Columbia, but they are publicly accessible data. So we do see some lag time in these numbers. And what will be interesting over the course of the coming years is watching how the region is growing today will affect those numbers in the next 2 to 3 years. But some of the areas where Columbia is seeing positive improvement, of course, is in our increase in percentage-born talent and in STEM degrees awarded. Areas where Columbia MSA is seeing a little bit of a negative trend is our employment in STEM occupations and our GDP per worker, which you've already heard talked about earlier today. One of the points that I do want to make around talent, which we have found particularly interesting, is that while we are seeing an increase in some of the STEM activities here locally, we're still lagging far behind the national average. So when it comes to that index and where we rank amongst our peer and aspirant cities, we've got a lot of ground to make up around the Columbia MSA and how we're comparing against that national average. But ultimately, we are seeing slow but steady growth when it comes to talent here in the Midlands. We also take an opportunity in this report to make some key recommendations, because as I mentioned earlier, tools and information and data tracking is only as valuable as the decisions it can influence and the change it can catalyze. So we've made a couple of key recommendations around talent. First, continuing to increase state funding for public 4-year and 2-year institutions, supporting regional opportunities like Cradle to Career, which we've seen enormous success with in both the Low Country and the Upstate, increasing participation in programs like Youth Apprenticeship and Apprenticeship SC, and ultimately continuing to emphasize STEAM education in our K-12 programs. Now we'll take a look at business and entrepreneurial environment. You'll see here that the Columbia MSA is around the bottom half of in this particular index. Some of the things we're looking at is the proprietor's share of income, small business activity, business density, and business services. I want to mention that Columbia has seen some positive improvement around proprietorship, and that our share of employment in professional and technical services is increasing and growing. However, again, what's hurting us here in this region, but while we see growth in Columbia, we are lagging far behind the national average when it comes to proprietorship and share of professional and technical services. Still, we are seeing local improvement, and I am encouraged by what that could look like 5 and 10 years down the road. Some magnifying opportunities around entrepreneurial and business environment. First and foremost, the Midlands of South Carolina has got to learn to tell their story a little bit better. We have tremendous assets in this region. We have an awful lot to be proud of. And we've not ever done a phenomenal job promoting that and telling that story. And so one of the things that we at Ingenuity SC want to do a better job and encourage around the region is telling the cool factor of all the wonderful assets we've got to be proud of in this region. The second is to continue supporting local business retention and expansion programs that have become a huge priority from our partners at both the local and municipal and county level. Creating more fundable, scalable, and growth-oriented companies. Continuing to generate excitement around investing in companies that we're growing right here in the Midlands, and ultimately capitalizing on so much of the construction and revitalization of new space that's being created all over this region. Enormous opportunities and potential to do more for our entrepreneurial and business environment here in the Mid-State. Now a look at innovation, innovative capacity and innovation. You'll see here we're sitting exactly on the index where we were with entrepreneurial and business environment. The news is good here. We're well poised for growth, but one thing I do want to point out that fascinates me every time I look at this slide is look at where Raleigh is. 3 times the national average. And when you compare Raleigh against the peer and aspirant communities, you can see what decisions like what they made with Research Triangle Park 30 years ago can do for a community. It can completely change the prospect and outlook of a community, particularly when it comes to their economic development. So we've got a lot to learn from what they've done right in Raleigh and how we can make that uniquely ours here in the Mid-State. A couple of the indicators that we're tracking in this particular index, SBIR and STTR awards. We're looking at utility patents, research and development dollars, and academic achievement. So some interesting observations here. First, again, while the news is good, we are seeing a slow uptick in utility patents here in Columbia, and we are seeing an increase in percentage of the population with a graduate degree or higher. R&D expenditures did drop a little bit from 2014 to 2015, but we do expect that number to continue growing again. And so we think that with this particular index, the key to our success and what you really see is catapulting Raleigh so high above all the others is things like utility patent, SBIR, and STTR awards. Those are the national average numbers that Columbia and our MSA continues to lag and continues to hurt our index value. So an area where I know we'll be most interested in working with the university, with the Office of Economic Engagement, with the Faber Entrepreneurship Center, and really asking ourselves questions of how can we be digging in to industry clusters and organizations around this region who have innovative capacity and product to offer, but who aren't bringing it into the marketplace. So a lot of opportunity there for us to see some improvement in the coming years. Some magnifying opportunities in innovative capacity. Obviously, continuing to encourage spin-off companies out of our research institution is critically important. Maximizing programs out of SCRA and with Capital Angels groups. Getting on track to increase private and federal research and development dollars here in the region. And again, continuing to encourage whatever we need to do to help those small growing businesses apply and win SBIR and STTR awards. Now for some industry cluster news. This slide is always fascinating to me because while we end up being a little lower in the rank, look at where we are compared to the national average. And you heard Joey talk about this when he mentioned some of the growth of industry clusters. Ultimately, we're seeing the Southeast perform exceptionally well against the national average when it comes to the development and growth of industry clusters. And Columbia is right there in the mix, and I think we're going to continue to see growth in this index. Here we're looking at things like high impact density, employment diversity, employment per square mile, high wage employment, and high impact growth. Some of the trends that we're seeing is that our employment per square mile is particularly high compared to the U.S. average. But some of the areas where we know we need to work and where I'm so excited that we have partnerships with organizations like the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness, who has access to information and data to identify where those fast, next growing industry clusters will exist. Being able to use information like that to catalyze the growth of industry clusters here in the region will be incredibly important as we try to maximize our growth in the future. Magnifying opportunities here, and you heard Joey talk about the skills gap that continues to develop. That's something that we've got to learn to address, not only here in the region, but across the state. And that will particularly impact our ability to not only grow, but recruit new industry clusters here into the region. So we know we want to continue to grow our partnership with the Council on Competitiveness, who does work in clusters across the state. We know that we want to take advantage of new growth in things like advanced manufacturing, especially in the aerospace industry. We want to make sure that all of our economic development partners around the region, be it at the city, county, or regional level, are working together with a shared vision for what economic development will look like for the Midlands. That has been something in this region that has been a barrier to overcome, but one that I'm confident that we can. Ultimately, what does success look like for this region 15, 20, 25 years from now? And how can all of the entities that make up Richland County and Lexington County and City of Columbia and the University of South Carolina, how can we better work together to move toward that vision for what success can be in that region? And I think if we can figure out what that picture looks like and start to figure out how to address some of those skills gaps, that we can really see some tremendous improvement here in this region. And finally, livability. And this is always a fun one to talk about because for the non-economic types like myself, it's something I can wrap my brain around. But here's what's important about why livability matters when you're thinking about economic development and prosperity. Because I'm here to tell you that if you do not have a community where people want to live and work and play and visit, no amount of recruitment, no amount of skills gap training, and no amount of effort around economic development is going to fix that problem. And here's the good news in the Midlands. We have a livable community. I just laid my eyeballs today on the 26 numbers of this report, and we've got good news here that's even better in our next version of this report. So I am very encouraged by the news that we're seeing around the livability component here in the Midlands. Specifically, we're looking at arts and entertainment growth. We're looking at healthcare access. We're looking at commute time, vitality, volunteer rate, cost of living, crime, and the Gallup Wellbeing Index. And here are some of the areas where we're seeing improvements in Columbia. First, our region continues to have an incredibly strong growth rate in arts and entertainment culture. Second, nearly 40% of our population is 18 to 40 years old, so our vitality ranks strong in comparison to our other peer and aspirant communities. Finally, our cost of living. I'm here to tell you, as a former resident of Washington, D.C., your commute time and your cost of living has a tremendous impact on your happiness and your well-being. So the fact that we can boast positive balance here in the Midlands is a tremendous asset for us as we continue to look for ways to both recruit and retain some of the most talented young people around the nation. Some areas where we need to focus some attention, our volunteer rate has continued to drop over the years, as well as our violent crime rate. It's an issue that we know we've got to tackle and that so many leaders around the community are already working toward doing. Some magnifying opportunities here around livability, ultimately creating a shared vision for improving competitiveness and collaboration will continue to be important. Increasing philanthropic giving around the region will be a driver. Continuing to support growth in arts and entertainment and cultural offerings, as well as to support county and municipal area efforts to partner on violent crime attention. Those are going to be some of the drivers that are really going to improve that already strong number we're seeing around livability. So, what now? I'm encouraged, I'm excited, I'm bullish about what the future of the Midlands looks like. The state of South Carolina is strong, and the future for the Midlands is limitless, truly. We've got enormous opportunity here in this region to catalyze on so much positivity that we've not seen before or felt before here in this region. And what excites me most about where we're going here in this region is that it's being driven and led by the private sector. So there is an effort that will be launched publicly in January. A group has come together to take this competitiveness report and use it along with other tools to drive and catalyze decision-making and change around this region. So you'll be seeing working groups form around each of those 5 indicators of competitiveness. So we'll have experts from the community working on a plan of action around talent, around entrepreneurship, around innovation, industry clusters, and livability, creating a shared vision and a shared plan of action for where this region can go moving forward. So while we've got some news and some ways to improve that's demonstrated in this report, I am extremely excited about where we are headed. And my one request of all of you today, as I've already stated before, is that these numbers are incredibly important. These benchmarking tools have enormous critical purpose, but they don't become powerful until they inform the decisions that you make and until they catalyze action in your organizations. So whether you're here in the Midlands or whether you're around the state, put these numbers to use. Let them drive what you're doing on a daily basis and join us in making what is already good news even better news for the years to come. Thank you guys so much for your time today.